let me call the boss and double check that he's okay with it. They had the power, so to entrust it to a guy that young, he had to know what he was doing and have some skill.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So in 1809, Benjamin was sent to Vienna, and as a reminder, 1809 is like in the very middle years of the Napoleonic War. And it was when the Fifth
Wars. Not Napoleonic War. Napoleonic Wars, because he was making war everywhere.
Everywhere. That's true.
He was a talented guy, too.
Yeah, he was a talented little guy. So this was right when the Fifth Coalition formed in that year. And this, of course, meant, like everybody knows this, but this meant that an English diplomat like Bathurst needed to get out of Vienna, and pretty quick.
So, for people who don't know what the Fifth Coalition is,
That was between Britain and Austria.
in Austria, because France is trying to take over all of Europe, and they are warring everywhere, and the Brits would not back down. England wasn't going to back down, and they were making allies with anybody that they had, and the name the Fifth Coalition should lead you to recognize that there had been a first, a second, a third, and a fourth coalition prior to this coalition. So they were bringing on allies to stand against Napoleon on a pretty regular basis. Now, the Fifth Coalition, I think, what did it last? 3 or 4 years? Not very long.
Not very long.
Yeah, it was very short-lived. But
No, it wasn't even years. It was from April 10th to October 14th, 1908.
The Fifth Coalition?
1908 or 1809?
I'm sorry, 1809.
Okay, because I swore it was one that had gone on for longer, but there were prior ones that had managed to stand for years. But so everybody that wasn't French was standing up against the French.
Oh, I'm sorry. The dates I just gave you, that was the War of the Fifth Coalition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Sorry.
Regardless, though, the Fifth Coalition, they had a couple of years under their belt before Napoleon literally squashed the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this is this is one of those times where it's just war upon war.
Yeah,
although this was the beginning of the downhill slide for Napoleon.
And eventually, of course, he was sent off to exile, and eventually he came back and said, "Hello, remember me?" and started all over again. We'll talk about that later on, the mystery of Napoleon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
There's some mystery there.
Uh-huh.
So in mid-November of 1809 is when Bathurst decided he really needed to get out of there.
Out of Vienna.
Yeah. He
That's because Austria had flicked it in, right? They had surrendered to Napoleon, correct?
Yeah, actually, I know that Steve did a lot of research on this. I did a lot of research on this, but I bet Steve's notes are a little better than mine. So let's have like Uncle Steve's story time about a little bit of the stuff that was happening around the Napoleonic Wars in Vienna at the time.
Okay, because I didn't. Well, this is one of those things where I always rely on Joe to go super crazy on the military campaigns, and then I ended up falling down the rabbit hole.
Fun stuff,
It really is. It's
kind of interesting.
It's strange because what happens is the Fifth Coalition is going on, and Napoleon gets wind of it, and he's none too happy, and he brings his army to Vienna. At this point, he occupies Vienna. This is in May of 1809. He occupies Vienna, and he thinks he's put down any resistance, yada yada yada, and everything's hunky dory. And then he's got obviously got a bunch of other campaigns going on. So he leaves Vienna, and a large portion of his troop force leaves. Well, it turns out the Fifth Coalition, this is when they're stirring up all this trouble, and they make trouble. I guess that's the best way to put it. They make trouble. At this point, Napoleon realizes that he has to truly come back, and he truly has to put down what is going on in Vienna.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's pronounced the Battle of Wagram.
Sounds right.
Okay. And that took place between the 5th and the 6th of July of 1809. And it's a weird battle because it literally took 2 days. Napoleon shows up. He fords his army across the river in the middle of the night, thinking he's got the upper hand. But this is when guns are really becoming prevalent, and cannons, and there are casualties somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70,000 men total each side combined. But
I can believe it.
Napoleon ends up getting the win, not clearly, but he gets the win. A bunch of the generals that are fighting against him on the Austrian side flee, they chase, some of them get killed, some of them get captured, but it's a really weird battle in the fact that it took such a short amount of time. And even stranger is that, go figure, as a dictator, Napoleon lied about the whole thing to the French people. In other words, he told them that he had lost, maybe 2,000 men. Maybe 2,500 men, but the enemy had suffered massive casualties.
I'm not surprised. That's, and how are the French people going to find out?
Well, they're not.
Yeah.
Except that, my husband didn't come home. Well, he was one of the 2,000. Or he died in another campaign. But that's why I said earlier it was the beginning of the downhill slide for him, because he wasn't getting these crazy, decisive wins like he had in his early campaigns.
Yeah, he lost a little momentum there.
But that's obviously, that's the problem you were talking about with Bathurst initially, is that he's got to get out of town.
Yeah, so...
Because Napoleon's coming to town, and nobody likes Napoleon.
Napoleon didn't like the Brits.
No.
Yeah.
The War of the Fifth Coalition ended on October 14th of 1809, and that's when Austria ceded to Napoleon, basically. And there was a little bit of a scuffle until early November 1809, when finally the French Bavarian army really defeated Austria in the Peninsular War.
One other bit of kind of geographical history that I think that we need to talk about, this, and I'll keep this really brief for this story, is that the northwest portion of that area was known as the Federation of the Rhine, and it was composed of like 19 kind of city-states, which had all put their fealty towards Napoleon because they had already lost to him previously.
Are you talking about the northern parts of Austria?
I'm talking about from Vienna north. There's a band just to the west of Vienna. There's a band, if you look at on the 1809 maps, and they just put it this weird little grouping, but it is made up of all these individual areas that were run by
like barons or whatever.
They were barons and princes who under Napoleon went ahead and consolidated power in these small areas, but officially they were loyal to Napoleon. So this is something to keep in mind, because this is the area that our dear little Mr. Bathurst is going to be treading through.
Yeah. So Bathurst decides again in like early mid-November that, okay, it's time to get on out of here. And remember, again, this is, 1809. We're not talking like hop on a train and hop on you could have hopped on a train, but we're not talking like hop in your own car, because just what you're a British diplomat, it's hard to get on a train safely.
Well, there weren't that many of them either.
No, definitely not, unless you're a soldier, in which case maybe there were some more. But anyway, he had a German courier or attendant, depending on like what you believe / read, how this person is described. I'm going to say attendant. His name was Herr Kraus.
Mr. Kraus.
Mr. Kraus.
Yeah.
They decided, rightly so probably, to move under assumed aliases because, duh. So Benjamin Bathurst went by Baron de Kock.
Baron de Kock.
Went by Baron de Kock. And Herr Kraus went by Fisher. Benjamin made no contact with the British consul when he was traveling. This guy's name was Galway Mills. When he arrived in Berlin, because he did arrive in Berlin from Austria to Berlin, Germany. Blah, blah.
Now, he was heading north to catch a boat to head to England, right?
Maybe.
Presumably.
Some of the accounts that you'll read say that he was headed to the Baltic Sea. Some of the accounts you'll see said, No, he was gonna go south after a while, and some of the accounts you read say like we don't know where he was going.
Doing a crazy overland journey.
He was just gonna go overland the entire time, all the way up to England. I mean,
Okay.
He was actually originally considering going south to the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight, he probably
Would've
should have
probably
done.
been a good idea.
Yeah. Oh,
You
well.
know, how many times have we said that on this show? In hindsight, if they'd
Oh,
only
yeah.
gone the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Benjamin hits Berlin, but he doesn't go to see the British consul there, which probably would have been a good idea.
That is very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know, I hope our listeners understand how diplomacy works, but you would want to check in with the consuls if you're a diplomat, especially if you were fleeing, unless you really didn't trust them.
Or
But-
maybe he just was passing on through and didn't have time.
Well, okay, so he wasn't, as it turns out, because he did deliver 2 letters. So he had time to deliver the letters, but he didn't have time to even stop and drop a letter to the consul there and say, like, hey, passing through, super in danger, bye.
I've also read that, you know, if he's not going to drop by the consul, I would presume his plan is to stay under to stay in cover.
Yeah.
To not break cover. And yet some of the reading that I've done made it clear that it was pretty obvious that everybody knew that he was in town. It wasn't as if it was a secret, which is, you know, that's counter to trying to stay. If you're then be like, hey, it's me, Benjamin. Hey, here's your letter. I gotta go. I'm gonna be staying at the inn over here, and you'll know me because I got this fancy pin in my hat. Bye.
Well, I gotta say, he did not practice great tradecraft.
No,
I mean, he
really didn't.
He changed his name and nothing else, and he wore very distinctive clothes and drove a distinctive carriage. He would have been wise
Yep.
to perhaps adopt a better disguise than just changing his name.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that whole situation in a minute. But so, yeah, he did stop in Berlin. He delivered 2 letters to 2 separate gentlemen, but again, didn't stop at the consul. He also changed horses in Berlin and hung out for a while. And this is the first time you see a date enter this story. So we have to make assumptions up until this point. But it is known, I guess, that he left Berlin on November 15th. So that gives him 10
Okay.
days to get to the next stop.
Which is strange because Perleberg, where he disappeared, is only 100 miles northwest of Berlin. Strange that it would take him 10 days to get there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sorry. My number is based out of Vienna, and I was like, no, it's 500
Yeah,
miles.
500
What are you
miles
talking about?
from Vienna.
No, it's 500 miles from Vienna, not from Berlin.
Well, he might have made some other stops on the way.
He
He
probably
must have,
did.
really.
I mean, he must have. He had to have.
And what kind of vehicle was he using for travel?
Yeah, he was traveling by a shay, or it's spelled like Chase.
It's a 2-horse carriage, right?
It can be 2. It could be 1
Okay.
horse carriage, but they're real little. I mean, they're the open front ones. It's not an enclosed.
And it's got like just 2 wheels and not 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have 3, but I think the 3 ones that you see are actually like driven a little bit.
Would it be kind of similar to like a rickshaw,
Similar.
except with a horse instead
Yeah.
of a dude?
Yeah, and a little bigger.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not like luxury travel. Although in the book that his sister, Tryphaena
Thwaite. Thwaite.
I love that
This-
name.
Trips.
Tryphaena Thistlethwaite.
I'm going to go with Tryphaena Thistlethwaite.
Joe gets it
That's probably
every
it.
time.
This looks like the kind of name you would see in a P.G. Woodhouse story.
Or a Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this is my Harry Potter name. I like Tryphaena, but how are you saying it?
I'm thinking Tryphena.
Tryphena,
Or Tryphena.
Tryphena. There's a lot of different ways you
Or
could say this
Typhoid
word.
Mary. Oh wait, no, that's not right.
No. Okay, so she's Benjamin's sister,
Right.
and she wrote a book called "The Memoirs and Correspondence of Dr. H. Bathurst." And she said that he was traveling with his entire suite, and I don't know what that means necessarily. I think
Suite is like a bunch of rooms, so that sounds like a lot of work for the
That's
horse.
a lot of
Yeah.
baggage.
no. There's another definition which is like much
Yeah, like
more
an
prepared.
entourage.
Yeah, an entourage.
Yeah.
And it does sound like he was definitely traveling with more than the one attendant, but Herr Kraus was his main attendant when he
So-
was in Austria and Germany.
So this is something that I'm glad that you did more research on the vehicle than I did, because if I'm understanding this is a seat with a set of wheels under it. It is not a full enclosure. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's Probably more like 2 seats, but yeah.
Okay, my reason for that is the descriptions of his disappearance. I want this to be understood.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look up it's like Shay's, like a Shay Lounge, so it's CHAISE. You can look it up, and you will immediately go, "Oh, that thing."
You know, in my my high class family, we call it a chase lounge.
Okay.
I am from the woods.
Yeah, I know you are. Anyway, Benjamin was dressed in gray trousers on the day of his disappearance. Well, this was his traveling gear. So it was the entire time he was basically wearing this. He was dressed in gray trousers, a gray frogged short coat. You know what frogs are?
What is frog?
Okay,
mean?
frogs are... This is where my degree comes in handy.
2 times a year.
2 times a year. So you know when you see the like really ornate embroidery on either side, and then you've got the thing that's just a ball that goes through a loop?
Oh, yeah. So,
That's
yeah.
a
Wait,
frog.
okay.
Oh, okay.
For everybody who's not in the studio, Devin is pointing at where the lapels of a jacket would be coming together. It's on your sternum.
It's instead of buttons. It doesn't have to be up here.
Oh,
It can be
okay.
all the way down.
Okay.
That was just a convenient place for me to be
In front of the microphone?
Filigree. Yeah. And then so it's the little ball that goes through a loop. It's not a button.
Yeah.
It's all fabric or embroidery.
Yeah,
So you guys know what those are. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I'm wearing one right now.
Yeah, and a short coat is
It's a short coat.
yeah. It's kind of like a fur-lined capelet that has sleeves.
Is this kind of like the short 80s jean jacket that has currently come back into fashion?
No.
You know, the
Like
just above the
John
midriff?
Travolta and all that stuff.
It's
yeah.
like if
Yeah.
you take that length but make it a cloak with sleeves. Yes.
Okay, so I was right. I
Kinda.
knew I knew fashion.
Okay.
Okay. We'll just go ahead and agree to disagree on that one. Anyway, so he wore his gray frogged short coat over a sable fur greatcoat lined with...
He wrote it over which he.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Over which he wore... That's how I wrote it. You're
Yeah.
welcome. Over which he wore a sable fur greatcoat, which was lined with a violet velvet and a matching sable hat.
Pretty spendy wardrobe there.
Yes. He also had a scarf and a very valuable diamond pin that, like, you know, pinned the scarf. Probably he was wearing it kind of like a jabot, which is like when you like tie. I'm sorry, I'm like
You're trying not to hit the
I'm trying
microphone.
to mime it while staying in.
It's
but
all
when you
rumpled
do,
around
like,
the
a
neck.
scarf and wrapped around, and then you put a pin right here.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You guys know this guy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you've seen paintings of this guy,
Of course.
right?
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
and he obviously a wealthy guy. And
Yeah.
he liked to show it off.
And not really hiding it while
No,
traveling
no.
through like rural
Hostile
enemy
territory.
yeah, no, not wise. Yes,
Yeah.
me.
All right, so
Okay,
so what is our boy doing?
Okay, so he arrives in Perlberg, Germany, on November 25th of 1809. Yeah, 1809.
1809.
I'm sorry. It was kind of in the like midday, is my understanding of when he arrived, and he spent the afternoon writing letters and then burning those letters.
Well, burning some letters.
Some letters, not all of them, some of them. And then he went to a local coffee house where he contacted one Captain Klitzing, who was the commander of a squadron of like crusade.
Curiosity.
Basically,
Brandenburg
like friendly,
Crusaders.
basically like friendly soldiers in that town, friendly to his English plight. And basically, he said he was a merchant and he didn't think he was safe. So could the captain please provide him with a couple of soldiers to guard him? And the captain probably saying like, crap, yeah, this is a really boring place. You can have a couple soldiers, no problem.
Well, he was also super agitated. He, according to the
Bathurst was, yeah.
Bathurst, according to
Yeah.
the accountings, Bathurst was making all of the gestures of a guy who was wigging out.
Yeah, he apparently couldn't even hold a cup of coffee to his lips without trembling. He was really freaked out.
That's what happens with me in the 98th Cup. But
Right. So the captain says, okay, yeah, you can have a couple guards. We're not really doing that much right now anyway, so here you go. So Bathurst goes back to the inn, which was called the White Swan, that he was staying at, and where his horse and carriage were stabled, blah, blah, blah. And that's where he'd been writing letters as well, was that inn. He goes back with his 2 guards. He slept fitfully on a table for a couple hours in like the middle of the afternoon, which is what happens when you have a bunch of coffee, right?
Yeah, because his plan was to like travel at night to avoid attention, right?
Well, it became his plan. When he originally arrived in town, he had asked one of the locals if they could switch out horses, which I guess is like a thing that you can do.
It totally is a
You
thing.
can
There's
get new horses.
posts for horses.
Right,
You're
basically.
doing a 1-to-1 exchange for
just
fresh
trade 'em.
horses.
And he had said, we're going to leave tomorrow morning. We're going to stay the night. We're going to leave tomorrow morning. Can you have the horses ready for that time? And it's called an ulster. What the ulster said was, of course, no problem. When he woke up from his fitful sleep around 7, Bathurst actually said, you know what?